it's not just a simple switch of language that we constantly see many times.
Yeah.
Let's just translate English to Spanish and put it on national Hispanic TV. But then the results are not there.
Well, yeah.
We'll be frank.
All right, welcome back to Exploring Growth. Today, I'm excited to be interviewing Hernan Tagliani, who is the CEO of the Group Advertising here in Central Florida. Welcome to the podcast, Hernan.
Thank you, Lee, for having me. Pleasure to be here today.
So on my search for CEOs to interview, I wanted to find a company that was in the business of creating brand campaigns, because I know this is, such an important way to connect with brands with audiences. And when I came across your company, I thought this would be a really interesting conversation. So I'm excited to have you on today. I want to learn a little bit about your company and talk about how you think about content, brand, and then growth overall, as I know you meet with a lot of companies and help them with growth. So to get us started, tell us a little bit about what is the Group Advertising company and who's your target buyer?
Fantastic. So we have been in business for 18 years. The Group Advertising is a national full-service multicultural advertising and digital agency. We started as a Hispanic advertising agency. And as the market is growing, is evolving, and then clients' demands and needs are shifting more into the multicultural arena, that's how we are transforming into multicultural, doing campaigns for different audiences, AA, LGBTQ, Hispanics, that we're very strong on that. And at the same time, general market as well. So basically, we help clients in how to seize one of the greatest sales opportunities next to the general market. In this case, within the multicultural arena, Hispanic market is the one who is driving the growth. So that's our kind of like our niche of expertise in helping brands to be successful with their approach, to have the right content, the right message that culturally engage with this audience effectively and efficiently.
I like that. I'm looking at your website and it said, I have to refresh it. It said, we believe culture is more important than language. We make brands culturally relevant. And I couldn't agree more. My perspective on culture is just in the times that I've traveled to other countries where you're immersed in a culture that is not your own. And I learned pretty quickly that language is very important, but understanding the language is just sort of the gateway into the culture. I'd have a interpreter that would go with me, and time after time, if I could just learn a few words in that language, they would appreciate it so much, even if I botched it. But more so, what it was them seeing that I was respecting their culture. And so I love that. That's like, forefront on your site to say all of that, because I do think that culture is really the sort of where we're at today, more so than we have ever been when it comes to marketing and advertising. And we have to understand the culture of the people that we're trying to reach more through and through. So talk to us a little bit more about culture. I mean, when you approach a client and you put together a campaign, where do you start?
Well, first we start by understanding the needs, the challenges that the client is facing in the current market, where they are now and where they want to be, and what are those short-term and long-term goals. Once we have an understanding of that, and especially, for example, let's talk about Hispanic market, that maybe they reach out to us to reach the Hispanic market, is understanding the consumers that whether they are currently doing business with them or they are not. So it's understanding the consumer's DNA, the wants, needs, and desire. Starts with there. By analyzing the market, analyzing the consumer. That's why the market research plays a very crucial and important role in this process, whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative market research. From there is what is going to help you to develop the right strategy to engage, in this case, for example, with Latinos. Based on our experience, I would say that 98% of the time, when we engage with brands, and sometimes you think, okay, well, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. They have their stuff together. They know what needs to be done. But what is very surprising to me is when it comes, for example, to Hispanics, most of the time, there's no market research that has been done. So they use general market research to dictate what they're going to be doing for African Americans or for Hispanics. And we're mixing here apples and oranges.
That's right.
So, because they see the market more on a language standpoint than a time of execution, and culture is more important than language. So, understanding your consumer DNA's wants, needs, desire, those passion points where you can introduce and present your brand. That's why the research is a very strong component of this. And that's where we always like to start. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, which also excites me because things are changing and are evolving. And as I was sharing with you before, there's no progress without change. So change is inevitable. And the census already have shared with us that, at the present time, 42% of all consumers in America are multicultural. And by 2028, that number will jump to 47%. When you take a look of millennials at the same time, 42% is multicultural, 25% Hispanics. Gen Z, over 52% is multicultural and 27% Hispanics. So useful diversity is becoming the counterweight of white Asian consumers. And in a nutshell, brands, they need to get on this wagon. If not, is that going to be too late? So it starts with there, understanding your consumer journey, your consumers' passion points, wants, needs, and desire, their culture. Is not just a simple switch of language that we constantly see many times. Let's just translate English to Spanish and put it on national Hispanic TV. But then the results are not there. We'll be frankly, very frankly, they're not there. You will get some type of engagement, but the return on investment and the growth and the results that you're looking for is not there because you do not have a strategy created specifically to these type of consumers.
Yeah, the thought that comes to mind is a brand being culturally tone deaf, and I'm curious if you could give us an example of executing on that. So like, what's an example of where you've seen a brand, and I'm sure there's a ton of examples of tone deafness in the market, of just literally Google translating into Spanish and just putting it out there, but maybe a success where a brand, maybe on your leadership, has said, okay, we're going to take a couple extra steps here. Instead of just translating this, we're going to actually think about what this product does or how it feels or how it comes across to that particular culture.
So look, there are many brands right now nationally that they're taking the lead. I strongly believe they're doing a good job. Of course, such as Walmart is one of them, Target is one of them, AT&T is another one, McDonald's is another one, Ford. However, when it comes to investment, marketing investment allocated to minority consumers, there's still a huge discrepancy. According to the Association of Hispanic Advertising Agencies, when it comes to Hispanic market budget investment, overall across the board is 7% of your overall marketing dollars goes to Hispanic market. When the reality is, right now Latinos, they represent a little over 23% of the population, and that's where the growth is coming from, multicultural base.
Yeah.
So,
and it's only growing from there, from my observation. I mean, it's not slowing down.
Yeah. It's not going away. Let's put it that way. Whether some politicians wants to change history or change the stories, they are not going away. Right now is third, fourth generation Hispanics, more than 50%, 55%. They're already on third generation Hispanic. You're dealing with a Hispanic consumer that is bilingual by culture, higher household income, higher level of education. So you're not dealing with people crossing the border. What the news and politicians, they love to talk about that because it benefits them for ratings
Yeah.
and for political purposes. But
Right.
only 1/3 of the population in the United States is foreign born. 75% is U.S. born. So they're already embedded into middle to upper class, higher household income, higher level education. So that's where the money is, and that's where part of what I do as part of my job is to educate marketers and CEOs that there's a huge business opportunity. They're just leaving on the table,
That's exactly what I'm sitting here thinking, is that how hard is it to educate these clients that how much they're leaving on the table?
It's hard, believe me, it's hard. It's just depend on how willing they are able to embrace, change.
Yeah.
Just I always tell them, just look at the market you're doing business right now. Where, let's say, if you're a retail store, just pull the demographic. Pull the demographic. What percentage of your customers in that particular store is Hispanics, and what percentage of that DMA or the zip codes 5 miles radius from your stores are Hispanics? And if you have a little over a 15% or 20%. That is Hispanic, and only 3% of your customers are current Hispanics. Hey, you have a huge growth opportunity that you're not talking to an audience that is very strong where you're doing business with.
That's right.
It's just like a lot of common sense. It's just sometimes, common sense is not common anymore. People tend to complicate things more than they are. And also, believe it or not, it's a lot of personal bias.
Right.
That's the reality.
Yes. Okay, well that's helpful, and you gave us this insight into how you get started with a client. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into the process of creating messaging. So I know, having a content agency, that the copy underneath the video, what you're saying in the video, the messaging is really the pointing into the spear. That's where you're really going to communicate what it is that is compelling to the audience, and it translates the vision for the company. So how do you approach with your client work that process of creating compelling messaging for these brand campaigns?
Well, it starts first of all, but we tell the client, hey, we do not translate campaigns. We don't translate English to Spanish. Why? Because when you translate, you are basically forcing a strategy and a message that from the get-go was created and crafted for a totally different demographic and psychographic group.
Agreed.
So by switching to language and then keeping your finger crossed and hoping that it works is not going to create the results you're looking for. So what we do is we trans-create campaigns. What that means is that we create a communication campaign appealing to, in this case, the Hispanic core values, respecting the overall strategy coming from the general market. So how we position your brand the same way, but in a culturally relevant way that the message has been created for them and to them and speak to their needs. So look and feel of your campaign, let's say if it is print ad or if it is TV spot, it has to have the same look and feel, the same elements. What it changed is the imagery, change the execution. That has to be culturally relevant. Sometimes we deal with clients that they have their own agency. The majority they do. And sometimes they have in-house agencies. And the biggest concerns when we start talking with their agencies is that you're going to change my campaign. No. We're not changing your campaign. When you see the ad in English and Spanish, has to have that art direction, that look and feel of the brand that we will respect. What we're going to be changing is the execution, is the message, is the imagery. So it's not just a simple translate English to Spanish and put a person that look Hispanic.
Yes.
That's not going to get you anywhere. And we see it all the time. Sometimes we talk to people that they are like, well, we want to reach a more affluent Hispanics or a more millennial, so they speak English, so I don't need to do anything with my campaign. And the reality is incorrect. You have to, even if you do it in English, because it's not about just one language, as I said before, you have to do it in Spanish and you have to do it in English, depending on the audience age bracket that you're trying to reach. The message is what it has to resonate to them. The message is what has to be culturally relevant, whether you do it in English or whether you do it in Spanish. Because if not, we're saying that Australians and Americans are the same because they speak English, right?
Yeah,
The campaign in Australia won't resonate to an
very
American. So
different.
adjustments you had to make. The same thing applies when it comes to Hispanics. So that's what we do different is we transcreate campaigns, we do not translate them.
Got it.
And this is what we continue seeing in the corporate world, that translation base. And believe me, we have seen so many very sad, let's put it that way, executions, right?
That's a
That
good way to put it.
when you look at the campaign, the ad in English, and
Yeah.
then look the translation in Spanish, and I'm okay, I get it what you're trying to tell me here,
Yes.
but when you put it in Spanish, it just doesn't make sense at all.
You know, yeah, it's interesting, this conversation, because what it makes me think is not only the opportunity that's left on the table, but the negative disparaging behaviors that they're doing to their brand. They're making their brand look less enticing to that audience, because the audience knows right away that I was a second thought. They made this for a different audience, but I was a second choice. And that's going to not necessarily make, now if the price is right and the convenience is right and all that, they may still buy the product, but it's not going to make them choose a new one to become a market leader.
Yeah,
They're going to go to the things that they feel more connected to.
yeah, and you're spot on. You said an afterthought, and that's
Yeah.
how most of the time brands they see minority groups. It's just an afterthought execution. But if we look at the statistic that I just shared with you, the growth will come from multicultural.
Mhm.
It cannot be an afterthought anymore.
No.
You definitely you need to pay attention to where the growth is coming, and at the end of the day, it's not about spending more money because you don't want to outspend your competitors. You want to outsmart your competition. So
Right.
it's by putting your marketing dollars in exactly where those areas of growth are coming. Just keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Right.
That's not going to work moving
No.
forward.
No, and speaking about connection, I'm very fascinated with that word these days, because I think that there's such a disconnect in certain brands, and especially when we're talking about multicultural advertising and messaging. How do you approach connecting a brand with a different culture that they may not necessarily be? It may be a secondary market for them.
Well, definitely is by understanding, first of all, the culture of the company, their overall vision,
Hmm.
what are they trying to do, and then overlap that with what are the similarities or what we call passion points that maybe that vision of the organization already have, but they haven't communicated to these
Yes.
audiences. Maybe they did it for the general market, but for Hispanic market, maybe they haven't, or for AA they haven't. So it's honing and understanding what are those angles of
Mhm.
introducing the brand where we can present it in a way that is part of that lifestyle of that consumer that will make
Mhm.
a difference at the end of the day. The way we're living right now, and especially with technology, that they're saying that advertising is not anymore about the products you sell, but it's the story you tell.
Mhm.
And technology, according to sociologists, created a demand of cultural connectivity. So millennials and Gen Z at this point, they care less of the product that you have to offer or you sell. It's more about the experience
Yes.
that you offer, and that experience starts, especially going to your website the first time, and then how you carry that experience through the whole process of purchasing your product, right? How
Mhm.
you carry that on in your message, in your ad campaigns, in the way that company communicate internally with their employees and externally through social media. And then after that consumers purchase that, then how you keep that consumer engaged.
Right.
By part of what you do, provide relevant content to them, engagement. That's where I see still a discrepancy on. They're so tied in, these CEOs and marketers, many times into meeting the quota, the goals, just making the purchase, the sale, but they forget about the after that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's going to continue fueling your business. It's
Yes.
cheaper than selling more products to your existing clients and asking for referrals than running an ad campaign for new customers that
Yes.
they don't even know a heck of what you're doing.
Yes.
But this is we're going through a moment of transformation, on a marketing standpoint, on society overall. And that's why I personally believe we're shifting away from the transactional marketing
Mm-hmm.
to the brand experiential. How you make that consumer feel from the
Yes.
first day they interact with your brand.
Yes.
Um, the same, sometimes I see companies using Google Translate in their website. That's the
Yes.
first thing that you can do. Just translating word by word. And sometimes, they even translate names of companies that they shouldn't be translated.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So is having culturally relevant content in your site that is massaged in a point of view that truly appeal to the cultural nuances of those audiences. That's how you make it more personal, more
Yes.
genuine, and people get feeling, okay, he took the time to understand me.
Mm-hmm.
It truly speak to my needs. I really will support this brand for what they're doing, how they're communicating to me.
Right.
So there's a lot of opportunities there that if companies just take a little bit of time and be a little more patient in how to engage with these multicultural consumers, they will be set for life, because that's where the growth is coming. There's not going away. Whether
That's
you
right.
want to
Yeah.
build a goal wall or not, multicultural growth, Hispanic growth is where, for every brand across all industry, the growth is coming.
Yeah. I agree 100% with all of that. I'm sitting here thinking everything that you're saying, and I truly believe that identity is really the paramount sort of thing to break through. Everyone wants to buy something based on what it says about themselves, and so therefore we have to tell more stories. We have to make it more experiential so that they can see themselves consuming that product. And I like where you really started this whole train of thought was through the passion points as the overlap. And I would say maybe a subset or similarly as values. So you take the values of a company and the vision that they have, and you match them with those cultural values or the buyers within that culture, the values that they have. There's an overlap there somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that's where compelling messages can be created and stories can be derived that make people feel like they really do have a connection, bring it back to connection with that brand. But I agree 100% that the brands, they have to get away from transactional marketing. And it's a mental shift at the leadership level, which is just the companies that get it, the leaders that get it, they get it and they win. But the ones they don't, they're stuck in this rat race of we want to spend X amount of dollars to get Y amount of dollars back. And it's all transactional from a financial standpoint first and last.
Yeah.
And those, as you've said, those are the companies that end up hitting Google Translate,
Yeah.
and it's all tone deaf to all audiences, really, because even as an English speaker, and I see the same thing in Spanish, I think, well, do they not love me fully? Is it they should love me only? Why are they loving me and all these other people? I don't feel like so they're losing something with me as well.
I add another layer, very, very well known. When most of the time you will see companies, we need to do something about the Hispanic market. Hispanic Heritage Month.
There you go. Perfect. It's
So
already there.
let's do a campaign for Hispanic Heritage Month so we
Yeah,
can increase sales. But then after October 15th, we just unplug it.
that's right.
We
Yep.
go silent.
That sounds like it
So,
will work.
so what are you showing there? How much you care about it?
Yeah.
You just care because you want to make a sale. But,
Yes.
multicultural campaign is not just a nice to have. It's becoming a business necessity. So
Yes.
making adjustments on your strategy is the only way moving forward to assure the sustainable growth with your organization.
You have to care about what they care about first, right? You have your agenda and even your vision, which is important, but you got to care about what they care about in order to get them to care about what you care about.
Correct. You're 100% right.
So with all of this, you're crafting compelling messaging. You're getting your clients to get on board off of transactions for a little while, if possible, and more towards storytelling and experiential marketing. I'm sure that there has to be some kind of feedback mechanism that is involved, where you create a campaign, it goes out, whether it's a social campaign or Google Ads campaign or billboards, whatever. How do you approach feedback from your audience to know that you're on the right track, assuming that you are taking your own advice and going, you're going down the right path?
Well, definitely, we ask for transparency on the clients, on those sales report. Of course, when we run this digital campaign through our platforms, we know how many leads, how many conversions, depending on the KPIs they're looking for, we're driving to the clients. Also, they will see an exponential increase on traffics, whether if they are retail stores, sales wise. A great case study. It was for one of our previous clients during COVID-19 that they were basically suffering sales wise a lot, and they decided during COVID-19 to engage us to do a Hispanic campaign nationwide, and that campaign brought them, sales growth more than double digits and generated millions of dollars of additional sales for them. And for me, it was very rewarding to hear the CEO of an organization saying that during COVID, after all the challenges the country was going through and the company financially, that what we did for them was a blessing because it generated sales that they were missing and losing from the general market. So that's what we love to do. We love to help companies and brand in how to engage with audiences with the right message, doing it the right way for the long run. We love to work with brands that we are very data driven, and we love to grow with our clients on the long term. 5 years, 10 years. A great client of us is the Orlando Science Center. We work with them for 16 years.
Love it.
So we love to take on challenges and projects of clients that they are like, hey, we don't know how to penetrate this market, whether we don't know where to start or whether we did it and we fail. And then we believe in this market, we believe in this growth opportunity. Help us grow and let's grow together. That's where we love to work and, put in the strategy, put in the short-term, long-term goals and the plan together. We get sometimes requests of clients that just call you for Hispanic Heritage Month, or they want to design a website or provide content, which, depending on what type of brand is, we sometimes we engage and sometimes we don't. But we're more on the big picture here. Unfortunately, we live in a very reactive society rather than a proactive one.
Yeah.
That's the way America is. It's reactive instead of proactive. Yes. We are more on the proactive. That's our message. We are on the proactive. I understand that you have certain goals to meet the quarter, but you need to see how you're going to grow your brand moving forward. What's your plan? What's your step forward into that direction? That's what we like to help on the bigger pictures rather than a one-off tactical execution.
So that leads me to a question about your actual business then, kind of coming off of branding campaigns and advertising and just talking about running a company. A lot of people are listening to this are CEOs and business leaders. I'm curious about how you approach, because you probably have a very similar situation as a lot of people, where they see the truth of what they're trying to do and what a real solution can be that they're bringing to a client. And you've outlined it really great, where you're proactive, not reactive, and you want to work with people who kind of get it, right? And I think you would love to just work with everyone that gets it and you're on the same page, like-minded. When you come across companies that you have a meeting of the minds and they say, okay, here's what we want to do, and you start with a proactive approach and looking at vision and goals and all of that, and they walk through it with you, but then you get to a impasse where you just know that they're not on the same page. They want immediate sales results that are sort of tone deaf to the culture, and you want to bring them, educate them, bring them up to where you are. I think there's a lot of people out there, experts out there, that have that same problem where they wish they could just find people that got it. What do you do next? Do you just pass on those opportunities and try to find the next most ideal client, or do you try to educate those clients up to the proactive approach, and how does that work?
Well, for me, the way it works is to, first of all, setting the right expectation from day one with the client.
Mhm.
And that starts by we as an agency qualifying the client. Is this the right client for us? Is this the right prospect for us based on the answers of the questions that we have?
Mhm.
So we go through a screening process. It's not the client screen us, is we screen the client. So we are the prize, not the client is the prize.
Mhm.
And then from there is well, based on what they're trying to achieve, it's a mindset thing. I used to in the past, when I first opened the agency, you're a small entrepreneur guy, you're trying to do the best for your client, and you feel that the client is the prize.
Mhm.
But the reality is, it's a mindset. You are the prize if you really want to find the right clients. It's
Mhm.
understanding the value that you bring to the table, and loving your profession, loving yourself, and respect yourself, and say no when you need to say no. So through that process is when we identified, okay, is this the right fit or not? We have many times that we have to tell clients, look, we appreciate the opportunity, but after this discovery meeting, I don't think it's the right fit for us.
Mhm.
And also, so we went through that route, but also we have encountered experiences that, going through the process, maybe the CMO was a little hesitant. This is my structure. This is what I want to do. I want to do a specific Hispanic campaign for Hispanic Heritage Month.
Mhm.
Then when we start having further conversation with the C-suite and having the CEO involved, that's what made the shift of, okay, well, maybe we start here, but Hernan's team has a point here that this should be something that we should be doing ongoing. So let's start maybe with a pilot campaign on a specific market. Let's see the tractions that they can bring, and then we can turn this into a national type of campaign. That's how we usually like to work when we see there's an opportunity here. Let's start small, right? Let's start the
Mhm.
crawl, walk, and run approach.
I
But
like
let's
it.
start somewhere. Something that has substance, a market that we know, based on where the client is doing business, that we know it can generate the results because the numbers are there.
Mhm.
And then we learn from it, and then we start adding more markets and adding more budget. At the end of the day, what I always tell clients, it's not about increasing your marketing dollars.
That's right.
We get it all the time. Oh, yeah, it sounds great, Hernan, Hispanic market. Yeah, we understand there's a huge business opportunity, but we don't have more money. And I'm like, I'm not asking you for more money. What I'm
Mhm.
asking you is to reallocate your marketing dollars according to those areas of growth.
Mhm.
So if you are in Houston, where Hispanics now became the majority of the state, and you're doing zero advertising for Hispanic market, you're not talking to majority. So I'm not telling you spend more money in Houston. What I'm saying is reallocate your Houston, your Texas budget
Yes.
differently. If you're in Miami, where 80% of Miami, Florida, of the population is Hispanics, and believe me, I still see brands, they don't do any Hispanic in Miami. They do just
Right.
English. Then it's an 80-20.
Yeah.
So you're putting all your budget into the 20%,
Yeah.
not where The
Yeah.
consumer is.
At what point are you going to realize that, is it going to be 100%? You're still going to be in English?
Exactly, exactly. So again, it's not about spending more, it's about reallocating. It's not
Mhm.
about outspending your competitor, it's about outsmarting your competition. Um, it's just common sense that we all learned these into when we went to the university. Marketing advertising is a lot of common sense. The problem is this common sense is not common anymore.
That's
And
right.
also, let's be realistic. There are people in marketing at this point. Sometimes they shouldn't be in marketing.
100% agree.
Whether they have a degree in accounting or an engineering firm, or
That's right.
they come from sales. But that's why you have this profession.
That's
They
right.
all need to understand that you need experts, and if you don't know a specific topic, just surround yourself with people that can guide you and help your brand um, to get where you want to be. We deal sometimes with companies that they're like, I have my agency takes care of everything.
Mhm.
I'm like, great, you have a relationship, you're doing good with your general market agency.
Mhm.
See us as a specialist. So the funny part is sometimes they're like, okay, you just give me a Word document of my campaign that my agency did, and then they will copy and paste and do the artwork for the Hispanic market. And I'm like, okay, your agency is a general doctor. I am a cardiologist. So you
Mhm.
came to me because you have a heart problem. I'm telling you that we need to do a heart surgery. So what you're asking me is to give you the instructions of that surgery. So your general market agency, your general doctor, will conduct that surgery. How does it sound?
That's right.
I'm like, we
Yeah.
are here to help you. You came here. Let us work with your agency. We all play very fair in the same sandbox.
Yeah.
We are the experts on this niche. Let's just partner together, work together for the better of your company and your overall success that you're trying to reach.
I love it. Hernan, thank you so much for being on. This is, as I thought it would be, amazing conversation. And I love talking about this topic of messaging and culture and branding and all of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me in your show.
All right. So if we want to send people your way, do we just send them to thegroupadvertising.com or can we send them to you directly somewhere?
Yeah. No, you can send them the groupadvertising.com. They can also send an email if they're interested in new business, Hernan at thegroupads.com. And then the main line of the agency is 407-898-2409.
That's great. And you were telling me before we jumped on here that you were CEO of the year last year or
Yes.
this year?
I was named CEO of the Year in 2019 by the Orlando Business Journal,
Okay.
Power Play of the Region 2022 by the OBJ. The agency also won Diversity in Business, and then I am considered one of the top 200 influencers and marketers leaders in the U.S.
Love it. Well, privileged to have you on. And thanks again for the conversation.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.